Outrage in small town Missouri after this young mom is shot and killed by her neighbor after an argument. And you won't believe it, police say this dispute that led to her alleged murder was all over birds in their neighborhood. That is it. This is the man who's accused of using lethal force on this young 23-year-old woman on his doorstep. And now we know what his side of the story is in court. He said he had to do it in self-defense. I will tell you why people and experts say his argument just doesn't add up. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Self-defense cases can be complicated. The laws surrounding self-defense vary depending on what state you're in. And this story we're talking about is out of Missouri. And as I lay it out for you, think about what the suspect in this case is saying, and I'll tell you why there are a lot of people saying the story just doesn't add up. This is Bailey Scott. She is the victim in this story. She was just 23 years old. She was a mom, and her children will now grow up without their mom because of what happened on July 6th on their road. And this is the man who ended Scott's life. That is not really a disputed fact in this story. His name is David Kip Heyede. He's 68 years old, and according to local media, he used to have a license to be a peace officer and was an employee of the town of Moberly, where this happened, which is north of Columbia, Missouri, a very small town we're talking about in this story. I have the probable cause affidavit of what he says transpired outside his house between 4 and 6 p.m. on that day, July 6th. Here's an image of the house where all of this played out according to police. Heyede claims that he saw an unknown female outside his home. He claims that she was acting, in his words, suspiciously. He says that she was walking down the street and around an unoccupied house in the neighborhood. Again, he said that he has never seen this person before. Heyede then claims that female came up to his porch, but before he could get to the door, she walked away. But then that female, and we are talking about Bailey Scott, the victim in this story, he says that Scott came up to his porch again. And this time, Heyede met her at the door, but he said he was carrying his handgun and he had it hidden behind his back. Now that in and of itself, this man going to his door just because someone he had never met before was there carrying a handgun behind his back, that might be something that might raise your eyebrows a little bit, but he says it's very normal. And that's typically how he meets people who he doesn't know who knock on his door. Heyede then says that female seemed agitated and she allegedly spoke with him about feeding birds in the neighborhood on his front lawn and attempting to kill birds. Now, we don't know at this point whether there is any truth to whether Heyede was killing birds in the neighborhood, but it was something he says this female, Bailey Scott, was very frustrated about. And if it is true, let's be honest, you can see why she would be frustrated with that. Now, at this point, Heyede says that he told Scott to leave. And this is where this confrontation escalates to a deadly level. Heyede said that he raised his right hand with an open palm, gesturing to Scott to leave his property. And that's when he claims that Scott then used her right hand to strike him on the left side of his face. Heyede said that he was stunned. He was so stunned that he fired 2 gunshots. He pulled that handgun out from behind his back and fired on this 23-year-old woman. One of the bullets hit Scott in the torso, and she died on that front porch. Heyede is the person who called 911 and police responded. Heyede is now facing a charge of second-degree murder for the death of Bailey Scott. Now, you can tell from the story that Heyede told police, that's listed in this probable cause affidavit, that he is going with the self-defense argument. But there are a couple clues that police put in that probable cause affidavit that really hurt the argument, it seems, that he was in such a fear for his life that he had to use lethal force. One is that police say they saw no sign of any marks or bruising or swelling on his face. Remember, he said Scott hit him to the point he was so stunned he had to fire 2 bullets at her. Now, the other part of it is, during the autopsy, police say there were no obvious signs of trauma or injury to Scott's hands. Now, it raises questions about whether Scott actually made any contact with the man who said he was in such danger he had to shoot her in self-defense. Heyede was arraigned on charges on Monday of this week, but the judge in Randolph County, Missouri, did not allow cameras in the courtroom. So for now, we just have his mugshot. Those who knew Bailey Scott have been vocal defending her since the news of her death. One friend wrote on Facebook, quote, "There are so many posts circulating today, so many assumptions have been made. I've seen she was breaking into his home, she was on drugs, she had problems. If you knew Bailey, you knew none of these assumptions would be farther from the truth. She was the sweetest woman, mother, sister, and daughter. She was murdered. No matter the situation or what that man claims, she was murdered. Please pray for her son, her stepson, the rest of her family, and many, many, many friends. I will not stop until justice is served. Missouri is a death penalty state, and I will be hoping for exactly that." I will talk with our expert, former NYPD Detective David Sarney, in just a moment about why the death penalty is not going to be in play in this story. But you can see the anger and the frustration that the friends of Bailey Scott have, and because she lost her life, rightfully so. Heyede is currently being held without bond, and he is facing a charge of second-degree murder. Join us now to talk about this case is retired NYPD Detective David Sarney. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime, especially for these cases where there is a debate that is going on of whether this was self-defense or not. But let's begin with the call that comes in. You have this person who says that he was defending himself. You have this young woman, she was just 23 years old. She's dead on the front porch. When you respond to something like this, I guess how do you take in the scene when you arrive?
Well, if you're a responding officer, again, thank you for having me. Responding officer, you're going to have a female on the ground. You're going to call EMS. You're going to, if he still has his firearm, or what happened. He says he has a gun on him. You probably have your gun drawn at this point because you see somebody down. The gunshot wound, your gun might be drawn. Find where the gun is. Hopefully, he'll give the gun. He gives the gun up. You're handcuffing him at that time for detention because right now you have a scene that is a female shot. The 911 calls in. 911 call came in. Apparently, he's saying he shot her. So either EMS is on the run, on the run already. They're running there now, or they're going, or you have to call them again. You're going to get this. This is a situation right now. It's an active crime scene, so nothing moves. Everything's going to be where it is. You're not going to touch anything. You're just going to make sure EMS gets to the scene and hopefully can render aid to the victim at that point. But unfortunately, she was dead on scene.
Yeah, it's a sad loss. She was a mom as well, and a lot of people in this community are mourning her loss. It doesn't seem like, which is kind of unique for these cases with just how things are these days, that there's not like doorbell video or Ring doorbell camera that might have captured it. We'll see if other homes in the neighborhood have it, but to this point, it doesn't seem that exists. So how do you understand what happened when you have someone, one person's dead, so she can't tell her side of the story, and then he's telling the story where it was self-defense?
Right. So, you're going to take the evidence available to you. If he's claiming self-defense, you're going to probably immediately look for injuries to him. Apparently, there were none, nothing physical that you saw. So you're just going based on his claim, but doesn't mean you're going to just stop your investigation. You're going to get that crime scene. That crime scene's going to get scoured over, and you're going to do what's called those extended video canvases, an extended witness canvas. Maybe there's a fact that maybe she brought her phone with her. Maybe she did record the interaction with this person, now the perpetrator, the defendant. These are things you're looking for, and what he's claiming. That's where you have to get the facts to either support that claim or refute that claim, and that's what you're doing. He's claiming self-defense. You don't see any injuries on him. You get the basic information available to you. He's getting arrested for right now murder too.
And one part that stood out to me, because he claims that this moment that left him stunned, that he had to use the gun that he had brought with him to the door. And I want to talk about that in just a moment. But there was no, from what police say, any sort of sign of injury on his face. And on her hands, when they did an autopsy, there wasn't any sort of trauma injury there that you would presume that if you hit someone in the face, like he says, that there would be. I mean, what do you make of that part of this story? How much does that seem to hurt the credibility that he has saying what happened?
Oh, it hurts it tremendously. This is the problem. We have these persons, and there's only one person left to tell the story, and in this case, it's going to be the defendant's story. But you have to get all the evidence, the totality of circumstances. I'm very big on that. You have to get all the evidence available to you to determine whether or not what he's saying happened. But regardless of that, the basis of this arrest is probable cause. They're going to look for forensic evidence upon the victim. Upon she's dead. It's an awful situation. But how close is he saying? Did he say he was to her when he shot her? So that's something. When that interview took place, that preliminary interview before an interrogation, he told you you're now going to look for forensic evidence upon the victim in this case. As for gunshot powder residue upon her, stippling on that, where you might see some burns. How close was she to him? If he's saying he shot her, what was the distance between that? How could we determine that based on the firearm that was shot? It's a possibility because as you get closer, you'll leave more burn marks upon the victim's clothing and the body.
When it comes to a slap, because let's just say she slapped him across the face, and like anybody, I can't remember the last time I got slapped. I can't speak from firsthand experience on that. But I mean, typically you would think someone would maybe have like red marks across their face. But when you're law enforcement, I mean, how common is it that you would actually have something that would last long enough to leave a mark? And then in her case, let's just say she slapped him across the face, that in an autopsy you would actually see that.
That's the issue here. If he's saying he was slapped, does that resort to the fact he's going to shoot a firearm? And they're going to have he's claiming self-defense because he struck her, but it's barely a there's no physical injury, and if she's not using a weapon of any sort, that claim is going to be refuted exponentially. I can't worry about the claim he makes. We worry about we get all the ducks in a row as far as the evidence to determine that that's either not happened or not happened. That's the one thing about detective work is we want to make sure we get the truth. And is he lying? And hopefully with what they have or developing at this point, they could say, yes, he is, or no, he's not. But the reality is I cannot see a jury thinking that it was okay to shoot a female or shoot anyone because you were slapped in the face and you deemed yourself in fear of your life in this case.
Yeah, and apparently it was some sort of neighbor interaction about birds and feeding birds, and it's so when you think of a loss of life over something like that, it's just infuriating. No matter how this case plays out, when it comes to self-defense, I know that it can vary the law from state to state. We're talking about Missouri. What is the bar? I mean, clearly she wasn't armed, and even if she slapped him across the face, he has a handgun. That seems like a very unfair fight, and I wouldn't even call it a fight, but what does the law say about when you can actually use lethal force like he apparently did in this case?
Well, you're looking at Missouri law, but in New York, you have to show some sort of retreat. And did he ever say retreated, or the gun was apparently behind his back when he shot her. Then when he gets slapped and then he shoots her. He claimed that he didn't know who she was, that she was acting suspiciously at another location. And that word suspicious is such a baseless term. It's like what makes somebody suspicious? Well, the action suspicious. And she's confronting about an incident about birds, about feeding birds and apparently killing them. And he's at her door. She's at his doorstep. He's at his curtilage in a sense. Does that allow you to shoot somebody because they're arguing and slap you? And I don't see any laws that will allow that to happen, and especially Missouri. New York, you have to show some sort of retreat before you can utilize self-defense. And not only that, the type of retreat is it from deadly physical force or deadly physical injury or serious physical injury. And either one does not stand up to this.
Well, and I think too, where he had said that, it was almost he was describing this person who was in like mental distress, that they were acting, in his words, suspiciously. They were around like an empty home that was in the neighborhood, but then all her friends, and look, it's two sides, and unfortunately he's the only one who actually knows what happened. They're just like, she wasn't, to our understanding, a drug user. She didn't have any sort of like mental health, where it's just very like, even though he's alleging this, it seems like from everybody who knew her that this is very out of character. And then when you have those types of cases, I mean, how is it present? Does this really just come down to a he said, she said, because we don't have video if this were to go to trial?
Well, he said, she said, sometimes will happen. But in this case, his claim is that he was defending himself. So you have to look at the laws of self-defense within the state that you live in. And in New York, there is no self-defense when it comes to getting slapped. Even if you're talking about a police officer getting slapped, there is a limitation to what kind of force could be utilized. And did he at any time try to retreat? He could try to say he tried to get. He didn't say he was trying to get. She was trying to get to his house. He's saying that he argued, slapped, and he shot her. So that's pretty what you have to go on as the statements made. But will the facts support what he's saying? And right now, physically, no physical evidence upon her other than the shot, no physical evidence upon him about an injury or serious physical injury at all. So, in law, if you're talking about New York State, it's like a harassment. If you get slapped and then it's a physical injury, it's an harassment, it's a violation. And there you have, you know, is a court going to convict? And is a jury going to convict a person based on a slap? And I slapped him, she slapped, I shot him, and I was defending myself. Most times it's an affirmative defense where he has to show some sort of reasoning behind what he did, and it's very limited. You have no physical evidence upon him. You have no physical evidence upon an attempted entry by the victim at this point, by the decedent. So you could defend all you want, but and I always believe this, detectives and investigators look to get all the facts together to find out what really happened. He's saying one thing, but what will the evidence support in that investigation? Because it's now a post investigation.
Well, and I'm happy you brought up the point where if he was a police officer and he was reportedly a peace officer or prior had been a peace officer in this community, I want to talk about that a little bit more in the moment. But if let's just say he was a uniformed officer and there was this incident where someone slapped a uniformed officer, then they pull their gun and fire two shots into somebody. I mean, that would not be. I could see a lot of criticism and scrutiny, to say the least, if that situation happened. Um, it stood out to me as well that he said it was common for him when greeting strangers at the door that he would have he carries his firearm and he's holding it behind his back as he comes out on the porch. And, I'm not debating the Second Amendment. It's his right to have that gun. But at the same time, for you, and you've seen these situations where things can escalate and then you get a firearm involved. What stands out to you about that? Does that seem odd that someone would handle a handgun that way if there's someone who properly knows how to use one?
Well, you know, I I still carry. I can still carry. I'm retired police department, but I don't walk around. Anytime rings my doorbell, I don't have my gun out. So I don't know why he did, and I can't explain as to why he does that. He's saying he does it all the time. But here's the next question: is for all the times you've done that, have you shot anybody? And that's the issue. Now you're looking at all these things coming back to eventual trial of this case. Maybe there'll be a plea as a result of this, but he's gonna if he claims self-defense, he's gonna have to show some sort of I was in fear of my safety, and she was trying to get into my house. And based on the preliminary right now, there's no essence of that. There's no essence of a physical or serious physical injury upon him. And if you go to the door every time with a gun, why aren't you shooting everybody? And this is one thing he might use as defense. You never shot anybody before. Why shoot this person? So these are things that maybe the defense will look at, but the detectives really want to see all the forensics, all the evidence to determine what happened. He can say what he wants to say, but let the facts speak for themselves. Look at the shot that the victim took. What's the stippling? How close was she? Uh, how close does he say he was to her when he shot her? So these are things that have come into play. And this is hopefully, if he did during an interrogation, you would ask these questions. How close was she? What did she do? We would actually sometimes stage it. We'd say, how did she slap you? So we get an understanding. And that way, we could show to the jury, and a lot of interrogations are now recorded, that what he shows would either lend to that self-defense or not. Again, I'm not going to determine one way or another. I mean, right now it's a murder to arrest, and they went to court The preliminary hearings are starting, and eventually they'll go to this trial. So as a detective, I want to get all the facts available and give it to the prosecution, because I want to make sure what he says did or did not happen based on what my thing is. And that's why I take every investigation as a detective, and I always had, with an unbiased opinion. You may feel a certain way, but you cannot act upon that feeling. You're acting upon the facts of the case, and that's what you're looking for.
He reportedly used to work as a peace officer, not a police officer, but a PEACE, peace officer. What is that?
Well, a peace officer, depending on what state you're in, they could be sworn members where they have some sort of arrest powers based on the job that they have. I have security guards that are unarmed, and we have armed security guards in New York. Not all armed security guards are sworn peace officers. We might have security people in certain departments that may be sworn peace officers. We have Tribal Transit Authority, the guys who run the bridges. They are peace officers. They can make arrests. But to that essence is, you're now off duty. If you're saying you were a peace officer or former, whichever it is, you have the same rights as a civilian. And in that case, as a civilian, do you have the right to shoot somebody because somebody slapped you in the face? And by law, not really. That's why they arrested this person based on the murder too. Shooting, when you shoot somebody, the reality is, are you intending the death of that person? The second degree murder deals with that: intent, death, cause death. And her death is the manner. The manner is a homicide, and the cause of death is the gunshot wound. Now, what caused that gunshot wound was his actions over the top. And right now, based on what you have, it seems so. But we want to make sure as detectives that we get everything. And that's what they're going to do.
And I know she has friends who are very upset, clearly and understandably, that this 23-year-old mom lost her life in this incident. I have seen some saying that he should get the death penalty, but for murder too, that's not something in Missouri that you can get the death penalty for. What is the difference, really, when it comes down to it, the difference between someone being charged with first-degree murder or, in this case, second-degree murder?
Well, first-degree murder may be intentional if they're a law enforcement officer or a particular standing in society. A second degree is intentional. I mean, that's what you're looking at. Did he intend the death of this individual? And by the one shot in the torso, and again, I sometimes sound like I'm very cold to this, but as a detective, we have to really, I'm empathetic to the family. I'm sympathetic to what happened. I feel for what they're feeling. But we as investigators can't concern ourselves about the feelings. We have to concern about the facts. And the facts don't stand to what he's saying. And that's beneficial for the investigators. And we have to get to those facts to make sure that what he says, yes, it did, or no, it didn't.
Yeah, it's just such a sad case. You just feel for the family, you feel for her friends, and we'll see how the legal part of this all plays out. Retired NYPD Detective David Sarney, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for talking about this case with us.
Thank you, and stay safe.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.